All right, so here we are back at the bike. So if you remember in episode 1, the video where I took this thing up into the hills for its first major ride, the journey begins. You may remember that I sort of mentioned the video, it wasn't quite right, it was running a bit rough. So I had to think about that. And this is what I think is happening. So obviously where I live here, quite close to the ocean, we're essentially at sea level, a few meters above. But as I headed towards the hills, climbs eventually up to a high elevation where I had stopped was a max elevation of about 450. So between here and there's 450 meters. Now that's not a huge amount where it really affects air density too much, but it does to a degree, about 4% I read. With the carby I've got in this, so I took out the old carby because I was having some troubles with it. I tried to rebuild it, but I just wasn't having a great deal of success and I got a bit frustrated with it. So I actually bought a Electron Beltron Pro. And these things kind of do a little bit of adjustment on the fly. For that to affect the richness of the bike means that it must be already running too rich. And when I took the fuel tank off before, I noticed I'd used up a fair bit of fuel, more than I probably should have used, which really does tell me it was running way too rich because the tank's quite light and I had quite a few litres in it. So for that to affect the bike's running just as I was going up the hill means it was too rich, and I had lost some power. The top end wasn't real great. So it must be running too rich. So what I'm going to do today is I am going to lean up the carby. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go back a full half turn and start from there, and then I'll probably take it for another ride. Same route, I'll do the exact same thing, so I've got to head up into the hills again, and that'll give me a measure. I'll see it, it'll give me a baseline, see what's going on. Now what I'm going to do, what I've been doing is I've actually been using just the tools that I carry with me on the bike. So I try and get into that habit of just, doing, it's obviously not practical in every situation, but if I'm doing some minor work to the bike, I try and just use the tools that I will be carrying. So in the event of some sort of breakdown out in the field, I know that I can possibly get myself going again with just the tools that I've got. Don't lose these things. These flies, I tell you. Okay, bloody things. I'll carefully pull this out. There we go. We need to go, to make it lean, I need to go counterclockwise half a turn to reset it to where I was. So half a turn counter.
It was at this moment that he knew he fucked up.
Yeah, this is where I got it really wrong. I totally turned it the wrong way here. And you know what? At the time, I really thought I was fixing it.
Now we push up and bring that face back. Okay, let's just make sure that, nope, see, that's not tricky. Really got to make sure that's facing forward. That could be a problem. We need to make sure. Maybe I have to adjust the needle back slightly. Okay, so it sits flush. Because that will be a problem. The fuel doesn't flow past properly. All right, that looks good to me. All right, that's it. Slide that back on. Put these screws back in. Honestly, it takes more time to take the tank off, the seat and the tank off, than it does to actually adjust this thing. It'd be great if you could access it without that, but anyway. A lot easier than doing a stock carby, I think. Just tighten those back up. Not overly tight. Straighten this carby back up. Okay. Now we do up the hose clamps. Now obviously I'm not going to test this today, which would be ideal, but I've tested this thing just briefly on the flat around the block, and it didn't show up any signs. problems. So it has to go up into the hills because that's, you know, the elevation change and everything. So the other thing, I'm not sure if you remember me saying in the video, was the neutral light. So the neutral light's just constantly on. And because it's just a grounded, like it just goes to ground when you're in gear. How does it work? I don't know, it's one way or the other. When you put it into gear, it closes the switch and light goes off. So neutral must open, like, no, it's the other way around. Opens the switch. Anyway, strain the brain trying to get that one right in my mind. Anyway, if it's grounding, well, that means the light's always on. So when it's in neutral, it grounds and closes the circuit, turns the light on. When you put it into gear, it opens the circuit. Opening and closing. I'm sure somebody listening to this will be screaming at, I need to find out where it's grounding. But what I might do is run a new wire from the plug here to the light there. Just disconnect that and bypass that altogether, because that way, if it's grounding anywhere along this frame here, that'll resolve the problem by running a new wire. If by running that new wire, it's still a problem, then the grounding issue is here somewhere, potentially in the switch itself. So that's what I'm going to do. But while I'm at it, I actually want to check the spark plug, because I put in a brand new spark plug before the first trip in that video. And so I want to see what it looks like now. Pop, there we go. That's what we want. Let's have a look at this plug. Whew. She's looking pretty black. Yeah, it's a bit sooty. I think that means rich. Well, I know it's running rich, so let's give this thing a bit of a clean. That's terrible. And look, other than it's not quite running right because of its richness, other than that, it really performed quite well. I can't really fault any of the rest. The suspension, even these tires, they weren't too bad. All right, I think that'll be okay. Let's pop that back in. Tighten that up. Okay. Gentle, okay. Plug back in. All right, so I'm not going to put the tank and seat back on yet, because I think what I will do is I will try and find myself, I'm pretty sure I've got some wire around here, but I will have to take that the light shroud off at the front there to access. It's just easy to access the cables and the little light back there. I'm just going to run a new cable and see if that fixes the problem. Might as well do it while I'm here. So I will prepare myself for that, and then we'll go straight into that too. Right, I've got my little supply of stuff in here somewhere. Should be some wire. Oh, wait, over here. Here we go. This is what we're after. You know what? I mean, I could use some of this. And it's not carrying a high load or anything. No, I've got a choice of colours. You know what? Let's go with yellow. Actually, how easy is this going to be to, you know, sometimes the stuff's a bugger to work with. You know what? Yeah, no. This might do the trick. It's a little bit of overkill, but... Right. So I will need to take off this, which means I also have to take off this. I just used hose clamps here. It's nice and secure. I don't have to worry about it. It doesn't rattle around. It's brilliant. It takes a little longer to get off, but honestly, then I don't have to ever worry about it falling off it's just not going to do that. So once again, still using the tools for now. Okay, there we go. Right, so neutral light, it's this one here. Let's pop that out. Now I have to figure out which is the ground wire. So this should be so I'll disconnect this one. This will probably be the 12 volt. So we'll disconnect this wire here. It's just it's a spare light here that's not being used for anything. So I will cut this. And what I'll actually do is I'll just lay it over the bike for now, and then I can test it. There's no point going to all this trouble just yet if it's the actual neutral switch that's the problem. We do have to, which we will cut here. You know what, we'll find out. What could possibly go wrong? Here's the switch. Now look, it's probably, what I might do is just cut this anyway, because I've got to run a new cable, so I can use the existing switch. Just got to make sure that that doesn't, we'll have to isolate that completely. Make sure it doesn't ground out or anything. Okay, let's try this. So we'll just connect that. Ooh, this is a bit thick wire. Okay, try that here. So theoretically, keys, back in a moment. What have we got here? Blinkers on. So light is on. So if I were to put it in gear, light is off. Right. Boom. Problem solved. So that's what it was. So it's obviously somewhere between, so if you have a look over here, so somewhere between this wire here. So this is the plug. This goes down to the neutral switch. And then from here, it goes through the wiring loom up to that light. Now, somewhere in there is grounding. So by bypassing that wire, which I've cut off there, and at the light, ran a new wire, problem solved. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to wire this in properly. I won't bore you with that. I'll wire this in properly, and then that way my neutral light is working again. So that, I suppose, is probably the only two primary concerns. I think I'll just finish this off, put everything back together, and then the next video we will go for another ride. We'll test it out and we'll see how she performs. Now what I might do is I'll make sure I've got everything with me And when I get up into the hills, I'll see what happens, if it runs great, if it's running too lean or too rich still. I mean, I suppose it's always possible. Maybe I can do some adjustments on the fly. I can do some adjustments up there and see how that goes. But other than that, yeah, I think I'm happy. See what happens. All right.